ready to dive into something really fascinating. Today, we're exploring the intersection of creativity and AI, and I know a lot of you are super curious about this, especially what it means for young minds growing up in a world swimming in tech. Think like third or fourth graders, their classrooms, their whole world is about to be reshaped by AI.
And what's really got me thinking is how this tech is kind of blowing up the whole concept of creativity as we know it. It's not about robots replacing artists, It's way more interesting than that. It's about this fusion of human and artificial intelligence working together side by side.
Okay, so less robots stealing easels, more like every kid having a superpower art studio at their fingertips, right? I like the sound of that. But what does that actually look like? Let's dive into this idea of AI as a co-creator.
You hit the nail on the head. This augmented creativity idea is huge in the research you sent. We've got filmmakers using AI to prototype entire scenes in a flash. Think instant virtual set designers. And writers. Forget writer's block AIs helping them explore totally new narrative paths they might have missed otherwise.
So AI is like having a brainstorming buddy available 24/7, always ready to riff on an idea. That example you shared about the 8-year-old creating amazing artwork with AI, that one really stuck with me. It feels like that's a total game changer for how we nurture creativity in kids.
100%. We're moving away from just mastering those technical skills to really focusing on the heart of creation. The what? Imagine kids freed from the limits of, how to perfectly draw a realistic bird, and instead they can bring to life a bird that flies a spaceship.
Now that's what gets me fired up. It's about leveling the playing field of imagination. Forget perfectly mimicking reality. Let's see those wildly creative ideas take flight. And that brings us to those third and fourth graders we talked about. Kids growing up with AI as just a given part of their world.
And that's where this gets really fascinating. If AI is their co-creator, their tutor, always there.
Yeah.
How does that change how they learn, how they think, how they express themselves?
Huge questions, right? I mean, imagine a classroom where AI tutors are personalizing lessons in real time, constantly adapting to each student's learning style, giving them instant feedback. No more one-size-fits-all education.
Exactly. Forget memorizing dates for a history test. What if a student who learns visually could have their AI tutor create an interactive timeline, or even a VR experience that puts them right in the middle of those historical events?
Whoa, talk about making learning immersive. Suddenly, school isn't just about memorizing facts, it's about experiencing them, interacting with them.
Exactly. Picture a student struggling with algebra. Their AI tutor could turn those equations into interactive puzzles. That personalized approach is huge. And this goes way beyond art class. AI can unlock that creative exploration in every single subject: science, math, engineering, you name it.
It's like giving each kid a magic wand that unlocks their potential no matter what they're into. Instead of shying away from complex subjects, they'll have the tools to dive in headfirst, to experiment, to learn by doing.
Exactly. And that's how we cultivate a generation that sees creative problem solving as the essential skill, the most important tool in their kit.
Okay, but let's talk about the art itself. With AI as a creative partner, we're bound to see some seriously mind-blowing new art forms emerging. What are some of the possibilities that have you most intrigued?
It's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure. We're talking about art forms that blur the lines between what's real and what's imagined, pushing the boundaries of what art can even be. One that's really caught my eye is generative art, where you've got human artists and AI working together to create totally new visual styles.
Generative art. Okay, that sounds intense, but what does that actually look like? Can you break it down for me?
Picture this. A painter teams up with an AI. The artist gives the AI some basic guidelines, maybe a color palette they dig, a theme, whatever. And the AI takes those guidelines and just runs with it, generating thousands of variations on that idea.
Whoa. So instead of one painting, you've got a million different versions of it, each one totally unique. And the artist becomes more like a conductor, right? Guiding the AI's creative output, choosing the paths that resonate.
Precisely. And this isn't just limited to visual art. Think about storytelling, interactive narratives, these stories that can actually adapt to the reader's emotions, the choices they make, maybe even real-time data from, their surroundings.
Hold on. Stories that change based on how you're feeling as you read them. So if you're feeling adventurous, the plot goes one way, but if you're in a more introspective mood, it takes a totally different turn. That's insane.
Right. It's like those old choose-your-own-adventure books on steroids. It could involve sensors that pick up on your emotions, or it could be based on the choices you make as you read, the paths you choose to follow.
That completely changes how we experience stories. It's not passive anymore. You're actually part of the creative process.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about virtual and augmented reality? Those seem tailor-made for blowing up all the rules of art.
Absolutely. Instead of just looking at a painting, what if you could step inside of it, feel the texture of the brushstrokes, hear the echoes of the artist's thoughts, experience all the emotions they poured into it, or imagine just walking down the street and the buildings around you transform into these crazy interactive light sculptures that react to the weather, to your movements.
The whole world becomes an art gallery.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned some art forms that are even more out there, blurring the lines between art and reality itself.
Things are about to get really weird. We're talking about bioart, art made with actual living things. Imagine sculptures created out of genetically modified plants that change color as the day goes on, or maybe they even react to the people looking at them.
Living, breathing art that's constantly evolving. Our museum's going to be full of these mind-blowing dynamic artworks. That's wild.
Stranger things have happened. And bioart isn't just about being shocking. It makes us think about our relationship with nature, the ethics of using living things as art materials, even the very definition of art itself.
That's a whole other conversation waiting to happen. But with all these incredible new art forms popping up, are there any traditional forms that might, not disappear completely, but maybe take a back seat?
Some things are bound to evolve, right? Like traditional craftsmanship. Don't get me wrong, the skill and beauty of something made by hand will always be special. But as AI tools become more advanced and easier to use, we might see fewer and fewer people pursuing those traditional paths.
So instead of spending years learning to work a potter's wheel, a young artist might use AI to help them design and print their ceramics. It's not that the old ways are gone, but the focus shifts a bit.
Exactly. Human artists working hand in hand with AI will have the freedom to explore the big ideas, the emotional core of their art. They can experiment more, push boundaries, do things that have never been done before.
It makes you wonder what future art museums will even look like. Will it be this crazy mix of ancient techniques and mind-blowing AI collaborations? I can't even wrap my head around it. But let's get back to something our listeners are really curious about. With all this talk of AI-powered art, how do we prepare kids for a future where creativity and technology are so intertwined?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And you know what? The answer might surprise you. It's about focusing on the core of what makes us creative. Curiosity, imagination, that drive to explore the unknown.
So less about teaching them to code an AI masterpiece, more about nurturing their natural curiosity and giving them the tools to learn anything, solve any problem, and be creative no matter what they're doing.
Exactly. We need to give them those core skills: critical thinking, problem solving, being able to connect with others, being adaptable. That's how they'll thrive in a world where things are changing constantly. We're not just prepping them for a world with AI, we're prepping them to be the architects of that world.
It's about empowering them to use these powerful tools to make art, tell their stories, and build a future that's as amazing and surprising and human as it can be.
You're right.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. We're not just like prepping these kids for jobs that don't even exist yet. We're basically handing them the keys to invent the future.
Exactly. And a future where they're not just glued to their devices, passively consuming, but actively creating, innovating, telling their own stories. But there's a balance we got to strike. We've talked about giving them these digital tools to thrive in this AI-powered world, but how do we make sure they don't lose sight of what makes us human in the first place?
Right, like we got to make sure they can still appreciate a beautiful sunset without instantly posting it online. Or get lost in a good book without an AI telling them what they should be feeling.
100%. Those real-world experiences, those moments of raw, unfiltered inspiration, that's the good stuff, right? That's where true creativity comes from. We need to encourage them to spend time in nature, to travel, to really talk to each other, really listen, without all the distractions. It might seem simple, but those experiences are what help us develop empathy, understand all the messy, complicated nuances of human emotion, and tap into those universal truths that make art so powerful.
Love that. It's like, that saying, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. But in this case, it's not just about using creativity. It's about constantly filling that well with different experiences, real world inspiration, genuine human connection.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And here's something else, especially with AI and this obsession with being perfect. We got to teach kids how to fail, like really fail, and be okay with it. So important. It's way too easy to get caught up in that instant gratification of AI-generated art, thinking you can create something perfect on the first try. But that's not how it works in real life.
Not even close. Think about all the greatest inventions, the most iconic art, the groundbreaking discoveries. Behind every single one, there's a whole graveyard of failures, wrong turns, experiments gone totally haywire. But those weren't dead ends. They were stepping stones, you know? Each one was a chance to learn, adapt, and ultimately create something truly amazing.
It's about giving kids permission to color outside the lines, make a mess, try something daring, and yeah, maybe even fall flat on their faces. Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the most brilliant breakthroughs. Exactly. We want them to be curious, to push boundaries, to see the potential in the unexpected. Creativity isn't about some rigid definition of perfection. It's about embracing the unknown, challenging the rules, and using our imaginations to build a future that's as beautiful and surprising and human as it can possibly be.
That's a great place to wrap things up, I think. As we close out this deep dive, we'll leave you with one final thought to chew on. If you could use any AI art tool imaginable, what would you create? What story would you tell? What kind of world would you build? Let those ideas simmer, and who knows, maybe you'll inspire our next deep dive. Until then, keep those creative sparks flying.